Daniel Mitchell's fingers tightened around his whiskey glass as Victoria Sterling's shrill laugh echoed through the dining room. He didn't need his sight to know she was performing her rehearsed charm routine for Patricia, his aunt, who sat at the head of the mahogany table like a queen orchestrating a business transaction. "Daniel, darling, I was just telling your aunt about the wedding venue." Victoria's voice carried that practiced sweetness that made his skin crawl. "The Riverside Country Club has an opening in October. Perfect timing for a fall wedding, don't you think?" Patricia's chair creaked as she leaned forward. "Wonderful, Victoria. The merger paperwork will be finalized by then. Everything falling into place beautifully." Daniel set his glass down harder than necessary. The crystal clinked against the table, a sharp sound that cut through the suffocating atmosphere. This wasn't a dinner. It was an auction, and he was the prize being sold to the highest bidder. "I haven't agreed to October," he said quietly. The silence that followed felt heavy enough to crush him. Victoria's fork clinked against her plate as she set it down. Patricia's breathing grew shallow, the way it always did when her carefully laid plans hit resistance. "Daniel, we discussed this." Patricia's voice carried that edge of steel wrapped in velvet. "The Sterling family's investment in Mitchell Enterprises is crucial for the expansion into the European markets. This union benefits everyone. Union, not marriage, not love. Union, like a corporate acquisition." Daniel pushed back from the table, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "Excuse me, I need some air." He navigated through the house using the mental map he'd perfected over 5 years of darkness. 23 steps to the French doors. Turn the brass handle. Step over the threshold onto the stone patio. The evening air hit his face, carrying the scent of roses and freshly turned earth. Someone was working in the garden. He could hear the soft scrape of a trowel against soil, the gentle rustle of leaves. Patricia had mentioned hiring a new groundskeeper, someone to restore the gardens that had been neglected since his accident. "Mr. Mitchell?" The voice was soft, feminine, with a slight rasp that suggested she'd been working outside all day. "I'm sorry, I didn't know you were out here. I can finish this tomorrow." "No, stay. Please." The word came out more desperate than he intended. He cleared his throat. "What's your name?" "Emma. Emma Carter. I started working on your gardens last week." "Emma." The name suited the voice somehow, warm and unpretentious. Nothing like Victoria's calculating soprano or Patricia's commanding alto. "The roses smell incredible," he said, moving closer to where her voice had come from. "What variety are they?" "Garden roses, mostly. Some David Austin varieties your aunt requested. The soil here is perfect for them." She paused. "Are you all right, Mr. Mitchell? You seem trapped." The word escaped before he could stop it. Footsteps echoed from inside the house. Victoria's heels clicked against the hardwood in that distinctive staccato rhythm that always reminded him of a countdown to execution. "Daniel? Where did you go, sweetheart?" Victoria's voice carried through the open doors, sickeningly sweet and possessive. Panic flared in his chest. In minutes, she'd be out here, wrapping her manicured claws around his arm, steering him back to that suffocating dining room where Patricia would orchestrate the final details of his surrender. "I'm sorry," he whispered to Emma, then moved toward the sound of her breathing. His hand found her shoulder first, then slid to her face. Her skin was warm, slightly rough from working in the sun. She gasped but didn't pull away. For a heartbeat, they stayed frozen like that, his thumb tracing the curve of her cheekbone. "Daniel, there you are." Victoria's voice was closer now, almost at the doors. He leaned down and pressed his lips to Emma's. The kiss was supposed to be quick, perfunctory, just enough to sell the illusion. But the moment their lips met, something shifted. Emma's mouth was soft, yielding, nothing like the calculated kisses Victoria had pressed on him during their staged photo opportunities. This felt real in a way he'd forgotten was possible. Emma's hands came up to rest against his chest, and for a moment he thought she might push him away. Instead, her fingers curled into the fabric of his shirt, holding on as if he might disappear. "Oh my God!" Victoria's voice cracked like a whip across the garden. Daniel pulled back slowly, keeping one hand on Emma's waist. He turned toward where Victoria's voice had come from, arranging his features into what he hoped looked like surprise rather than relief. "Victoria, I'd like you to meet Emma." He could feel Emma's slight tremor under his hand, but she didn't pull away. "Emma, this is Victoria Sterling." The silence stretched so long Daniel began to wonder if Victoria had simply vanished into thin air. Finally, she spoke, her voice strangled. "I see. And Emma is?" "The woman I've been seeing," Daniel said, the lie flowing easier than he'd expected. "We've been keeping things quiet, but I think it's time everyone knew." Patricia's heels clicked rapidly across the patio stones. "Daniel, what is the meaning of this? Who is this person?" "Emma Carter," Emma said, her voice steadier than Daniel had expected. "I work on the gardens here." "You work here?" Patricia's voice climbed an octave. "Daniel, surely you're not serious about a common laborer?" The disdain in his aunt's voice made Daniel's jaw clench. Emma is anything but common. He felt Emma's hand tighten on his shirt, a silent warning or maybe gratitude. He couldn't tell which. "This is ridiculous," Victoria sputtered. "Daniel, we have an understanding. Our families have agreements." "I never agreed to anything," Daniel said firmly. "And I believe those agreements were made without consulting what I actually wanted." Patricia's sharp intake of breath was audible even over the evening sounds of crickets and distant traffic. "We'll discuss this inside." "Now." "No." Daniel's voice carried a finality that surprised even him. "We'll discuss it tomorrow. Emma and I have plans tonight." Emma's grip on his shirt tightened again, and he wondered if he'd pushed the charade too far. But she didn't contradict him. Victoria's heels clicked rapidly back toward the house. "This isn't over, Daniel." Patricia lingered for a moment longer. "You're making a terrible mistake," she said quietly. "Think about what you're throwing away." Only after both women had disappeared inside did Daniel realize he was still holding Emma, and she was still letting him. Emma's heart hammered against her ribs as Daniel's hand remained steady on her waist. The sound of Victoria's heels disappeared into the house, but the weight of what had just happened settled over them like fog rolling in from the coast. Daniel's thumb traced a small circle on her hip, an unconscious gesture that sent heat spiraling through her body. She should step away, should explain that this was insane and she needed to get back to her real job of digging through his family's secrets. Instead, she found herself studying his face in the dim patio light. Up close, he was more devastating than she'd expected. The photos in the old newspaper clippings hadn't captured the way his jaw tightened when he was angry, or how his sightless eyes seemed to look right through her anyway. 5 years of blindness hadn't diminished his presence. If anything, it had concentrated it, made him more intense. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, finally dropping his hand. "That was incredibly presumptuous of me." Emma stepped back, immediately missing his warmth. "It's fine. I mean, it worked, didn't it?" A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "You could say that, though I think I may have just created a much bigger problem than the one I was trying to solve." Through the French doors, Emma could see Victoria pacing in the dining room like a caged predator. Patricia sat rigid in her chair, her phone pressed to her ear. Even from this distance, Emma could see the older woman's mouth moving rapidly, likely calling in reinforcements for whatever battle Daniel had just declared. "What exactly did I just get dragged into?" Emma asked. Daniel ran a hand through his dark hair, disturbing the careful style. "An arranged marriage masquerading as a business merger. Victoria's family wants access to Mitchell Enterprises' shipping contracts. Patricia wants their European connections. I'm apparently the dowry that makes it all possible." Emma had read about the proposed Sterling Mitchell partnership in the financial papers she'd been studying for weeks. On paper, it looked like a smart business move. In reality, it was Daniel being sold like livestock. "And you don't want to marry her. I'd rather throw myself off the Riverside Bridge." Daniel's voice was flat, matter of fact. "Victoria Sterling is beautiful, well-connected, and completely ruthless. She's also been planning our wedding since she was 16, apparently." Emma watched Patricia through the window, noting how the woman's free hand clenched and unclenched on the table. "Your aunt seems pretty invested in this happening." "Patricia raised me after my parents died. She's also the current CEO of Mitchell Enterprises since my accident made certain responsibilities challenging." Daniel's voice carried a bitterness that made Emma's chest tighten. "She's convinced this marriage is the only way to secure the company's future." The pieces of her father's old files began clicking together in Emma's mind. Robert Carter had been investigating irregularities in Mitchell Enterprises' accounts before his death. If Patricia was desperate enough to force Daniel into an unwanted marriage for business reasons, what else might she be willing to do? So where does that leave us? Emma asked carefully. Daniel turned toward her voice, his expression serious. That depends. Are you willing to help me? Help you how? Be my girlfriend. Publicly. Just for a while, until I can figure out how to get Patricia and the Sterlings to back off permanently. Emma's pulse quickened. This was better than she dared hope for. Playing Daniel's girlfriend would give her access to the family, their records, their private conversations. She could investigate her father's death from the inside. But looking at Daniel's face, seeing the genuine desperation beneath his careful control, guilt twisted in her stomach. He was trusting her with something important, and she was planning to betray that trust. What's in it for me? She asked, hating how mercenary she sounded, but needing to maintain her cover. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. What do you need? The simple question caught her off guard. Not what she wanted, but what she needed, as if he understood the difference. Money, she said honestly. I have some debts that are getting harder to manage. It wasn't entirely a lie. The private investigator she'd hired to look into her father's death had charged her $5,000 up front, money she'd borrowed against her small savings. Her apartment rent was 2 months behind, and her beat-up Honda was making ominous noises that probably meant expensive repairs. How much? $20,000 would solve most of my problems. Daniel didn't even hesitate. Done. $20,000 to be my girlfriend for, let's say, 3 months. That should be enough time to convince everyone this is serious. Emma's breath caught. $20,000 was more than she made in a year doing odd landscaping jobs. It was also enough to fund a real investigation into her father's death, maybe even hire a better private investigator. What exactly would being your girlfriend involve? She asked. Dinners, social events, family gatherings. Probably some media appearances, since Victoria won't go quietly. Daniel's mouth twisted. You'd need to move into the house. Having a long-distance relationship wouldn't be convincing. Move into the Mitchell house. Emma's heart raced at the possibilities. She could search Daniel's father's old office, access family documents, maybe even find evidence of what Patricia had been hiding. I'd have my own room, she asked. Of course. This is business, not. Daniel trailed off, color creeping up his neck. Emma found his embarrassment oddly endearing. For a moment, she almost forgot why she was really here. Almost forgot that she suspected his family was responsible for her father's death. Okay, she said quietly. I'll do it. Daniel's shoulders sagged with relief. Thank you. I know it's a lot to ask. What happens when the 3 months are up? We'll have a civilized breakup. Irreconcilable differences or something like that. I'll make sure you have excellent references for any future landscaping work. Emma nodded, though something twisted uncomfortably in her chest at the thought of their inevitable ending. Which was ridiculous. This was a business arrangement, nothing more. When do we start? She asked. Right now, if you're willing. Patricia will want to discuss damage control first thing tomorrow morning. If we're going to sell this, we need to get our story straight. Through the French doors, Emma could see Patricia ending her phone call. The older woman's face was set in grim lines as she stood and smoothed her skirt. She's coming back, Emma warned. Daniel straightened, slipping seamlessly back into the role of devoted boyfriend. When he took her hand, his fingers interlaced with hers naturally, as if they'd done this 100 times before. Emma, he said softly, just loud enough for Patricia to hear as she stepped onto the patio. Are you sure about this? Once we go public, there's no taking it back. Emma squeezed his hand, surprised by how right it felt. I'm sure. Patricia's heels clicked against the stone as she approached them. Daniel, we need to talk. Privately. Anything you need to say to me, you can say in front of Emma, Daniel replied smoothly. Patricia's eyes narrowed as she studied Emma with undisguised hostility. Very well. The Sterlings are threatening to pull their investment unless you end this. Infatuation immediately. Then I guess they'll have to pull their investment, Daniel said calmly. Emma felt the moment Patricia's calculation shifted, saw the exact second the older woman decided to change tactics. Patricia's expression softened into something resembling motherly concern. Daniel, sweetheart, I understand you're rebelling against the pressure, but think about what you're risking. The company, your future, everything your father built. For the first time since Emma had known him, Daniel hesitated. She felt it in the slight tightening of his grip, saw it in the way his jaw clenched. Emma knew she should stay quiet, let him make his own decision. But something about Patricia's manipulative tone made her speak up. Maybe the company isn't worth preserving if it requires sacrificing someone's happiness, she said quietly. Patricia's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something cold and calculating underneath. How refreshing. A philosopher with dirt under her fingernails. Emma's hands shook as she unlocked the servant's entrance to the Mitchell house at 6 in the morning. 3 days had passed since her agreement with Daniel, and she still couldn't believe she was actually living here. The guest room Patricia had grudgingly assigned her was larger than her entire apartment, complete with a marble bathroom and a view of the gardens she was supposedly here to tend. The kitchen was empty, just as she'd hoped. Emma moved quietly to the coffee maker, her bare feet silent on the cold tile. She'd learned Daniel's routine quickly enough. He woke early, made coffee, then sat on the back patio until sunrise. It was the only time she'd found him completely alone, without Patricia hovering nearby or household staff interrupting. She poured 2 cups and headed outside, finding him exactly where she'd expected. Daniel sat in one of the wrought iron chairs, his face turned toward where the sun would rise over the Connecticut hills. He'd changed from his formal dinner clothes into jeans and a plain white t-shirt that made him look younger, more approachable. "Coffee delivery," she said softly, not wanting to startle him. His head turned toward her voice, and something that might have been relief crossed his features. "You don't have to bring me coffee, Emma. You're not actually the help. Maybe I like having an excuse to check on you." The words slipped out before she could stop them, more honest than she'd intended. Daniel accepted the mug, his fingers brushing hers in the exchange. Even that brief contact sent warmth shooting up her arm. "Couldn't sleep either?" Emma settled into the chair beside him, tucking her legs under herself. "Patricia's walls are thin. I could hear her on the phone until past midnight, probably strategizing with the Sterlings. She's not going to give up easily." Daniel sipped his coffee, grimacing slightly. "This is actually good. I was expecting the usual sludge Mrs. Henderson makes. I may have brought my own coffee. The stuff in your kitchen could strip paint." A genuine laugh escaped him, the first she'd heard since their arrangement began. The sound did dangerous things to her pulse. "So what's the plan for today?" Daniel asked. "I assume Patricia will want us to make another public appearance." Emma had been dreading this conversation. Last night, Patricia had cornered her in the hallway with a list of social obligations that would keep them busy for weeks. Garden parties, charity auctions, dinner parties with Mitchell Enterprises' biggest clients. Each event was carefully designed to showcase Daniel and Emma's relationship while subtly undermining its legitimacy. "The Riverside Historical Society is hosting a fundraiser tomorrow night," Emma said. "Black tie, $500 a plate. All of Connecticut high society." Daniel's expression darkened. "Let me guess. Victoria and her parents will be there." Front and center, according to Patricia. She seemed particularly pleased about that detail. Of course she did. Daniel set down his mug harder than necessary. "Victoria will use the opportunity to publicly humiliate you. Make it clear that you don't belong in that world." Emma's spine stiffened. "I can handle myself." "I know you can. But Victoria plays dirty, and she has home field advantage." Daniel turned toward her, his sightless eyes somehow finding hers anyway. "Are you sure you want to do this? It's not too late to back out." The genuine concern in his voice made Emma's chest tighten. She was supposed to be using him, not developing actual feelings for him. But every conversation they had, every small kindness he showed her, made it harder to remember why she was really here. "I'm not backing out," she said firmly. "Though I should probably warn you that my idea of formal wears a dress from Target. We'll take care of that. Patricia's already arranged for a stylist to come by this afternoon." Emma tried not to think about how much that would cost, or how temporary this whole arrangement was. In 3 months, she'd be back to her real life, and Daniel would be free to find someone who actually deserved his trust. "What about right now?" she asked, pushing the uncomfortable thoughts away. "I actually do need to work on the gardens if I'm going to maintain my cover." Daniel stood, extending his hand to her. "Mind if I join you? I used to help my mother with the roses when I was younger." Emma hesitated. Having Daniel close while she worked would make it nearly impossible to search for the information she needed. But she also couldn't think of a graceful way to refuse without seeming suspicious. "Sure," she said, taking his hand and letting him pull her to her feet. They walked to the rose garden together, Daniel's hand resting lightly on Emma's shoulder for guidance. She'd learned he hated being treated like an invalid, so she kept her help minimal, just enough to prevent him from walking into obstacles. "These are beautiful," Daniel said, reaching out to touch one of the blooms. His fingers traced the petals with surprising gentleness. "David Austin, right? The catalog mentioned these were my mother's favorites." Emma watched him handle the flower with such care, and something shifted in her chest. "Patricia told me to replace them with something more modern. Said the old varieties were too sentimental." Daniel's hand stilled. "She wants to tear out my mother's roses? I told her they were too established to transplant safely. Bought us some time, but she'll probably insist eventually." "Over my dead body." Daniel's voice was quiet but fierce. "These roses are the only thing left of her in this place." Emma knelt beside the rose bed, pulling weeds that didn't really need pulling. Anything to avoid looking at the pain on Daniel's face. "Tell me about her." "She was everything Patricia isn't. Warm, genuine, never cared about social status or business connections." Daniel lowered himself to the ground beside Emma, his movements careful but determined. "She died when I was 15. Car accident on the way to pick me up from school." "I'm sorry." Emma's throat tightened. Her own father had died in a car accident, though the circumstances had been far more suspicious. Losing a parent that young, it changes everything. Daniel's hand found hers in the dirt, covering her fingers. "You sound like you know something about that." Emma's pulse jumped. She needed to be careful here, not reveal too much about her own loss. "My father died 5 years ago. Same kind of sudden, senseless accident." "The same time as my accident," Daniel said quietly. Emma's breath caught. She'd known the timing was close, but hearing him say it made the connection feel more real, more ominous. "What happened to you?" she asked, though she already knew from the newspaper reports she'd studied. "Car crash. I was driving back from a business meeting in Hartford, and a truck ran a red light. Doctors said I was lucky to survive." Daniel's thumb traced across her knuckles. "Some days I'm not sure I agree with them." The bitterness in his voice made Emma want to comfort him, to tell him she was grateful he'd survived. But she couldn't do that without revealing how much he was starting to mean to her. "The blindness isn't permanent, is it?" she asked instead. Daniel was quiet for so long Emma thought he wouldn't answer. "There's a procedure," he finally said. "Experimental surgery that might restore partial vision. But the risks." "What kind of risks?" "Complete vision loss. Brain damage. Death, in some cases." Daniel's hand tightened on hers. "Patricia thinks I'm being foolish not to try it. She's convinced I can't run the company effectively as I am." Emma's anger flared on his behalf. "That's ridiculous. You're obviously capable of making your own decisions. Try telling Patricia that. She's been making decisions for me since the accident, using my condition as justification." Daniel's voice carried a frustration that sounded like it had been building for years. "Sometimes I think she prefers me this way, dependent on her guidance." A chill ran down Emma's spine. If Patricia benefited from Daniel's blindness, from his supposed incapacity, what lengths might she go to maintain that control? "Have you considered getting a second opinion about the surgery?" Emma asked carefully. "I've seen 6 different specialists. They all say the same thing." Daniel lifted their joined hands, pressing Emma's palm against his cheek. "But lately, I've been wondering if the risk might be worth it." "Why lately?" Daniel's smile was soft, vulnerable in a way that made Emma's heart ache. "Because for the first time in 5 years, I have something I'd like to see." Emma's breath caught as she realized he was talking about her. The guilt she'd been trying to suppress crashed over her like a wave. Here was this incredible man, trusting her with his deepest fears and hopes, and she was lying to him about everything. "Daniel," she whispered, not sure what she wanted to say. His free hand came up to cup her face, his thumb tracing her cheekbone just like that first night. "Emma, I need you to know that whatever happens with this arrangement, whatever people say about us, you've given me something I thought I'd lost forever." "What's that?" "Hope." Before Emma could respond, footsteps crunched on the gravel path behind them. They sprang apart like guilty teenagers, Emma's heart hammering as Patricia's voice cut through the morning air. "How touching," Patricia said, her tone dripping with disapproval. "Daniel, your stylist appointment has been moved up to 10 o'clock. And Emma, I need to speak with you privately." Emma met Daniel's concerned gaze, seeing her own worry reflected in his sightless eyes. Whatever Patricia wanted to discuss, it wasn't going to be pleasant. "I'll see you later," Emma told Daniel, squeezing his hand once more before standing. "Emma," he called softly as she started to follow Patricia toward the house. Be careful. The warning in his voice suggested he knew his aunt better than Emma had realized. As she walked away, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that she was about to discover just how dangerous Patricia Mitchell could be when threatened. Patricia's heels clicked against the marble floor of her office like a metronome counting down to execution. Emma stood in the center of the room, surrounded by oil paintings of stern-faced Mitchell ancestors who seemed to judge her from their gilded frames. "Sit," Patricia commanded, gesturing to the chair across from her imposing mahogany desk. Emma remained standing. "I prefer to stand." Patricia's eyes narrowed, but she didn't push the issue. Instead, she opened a manila folder and spread its contents across the desk with theatrical precision. Bank statements, credit reports, rental agreements. Emma's entire financial life laid bare like evidence at a trial. Emma Carter, 28 years old, currently 3 months behind on rent for a studio apartment in Hartford. Outstanding student loans totaling $42,000. No steady employment history. Patricia's voice was crisp, clinical, and yet somehow, you've managed to capture my nephew's attention. Emma's stomach dropped, but she kept her expression neutral. I fail to see how my finances are any of your business. Everything that concerns Daniel is my business. Patricia stood, moving around the desk with predatory grace. I know exactly what you are, Miss Carter. A gold digger who saw an opportunity and seized it. The accusation stung because it wasn't entirely wrong. Emma was here for money, just not in the way Patricia thought. You don't know anything about me, Emma said quietly. Don't I? Patricia smiled, the expression sharp enough to cut glass. You're not the first pretty young thing to set her sights on the Mitchell fortune, but you were the first to be quite so calculating about it. Emma forced herself not to react. Patricia was fishing, trying to provoke a response that would confirm her suspicions. $20,000, Patricia continued, circling Emma like a shark. That's what Daniel offered you, isn't it? A tidy sum for 3 months of pretending to care about a blind man. I do care about him, Emma said, the words escaping before she could stop them. Patricia's smile widened. How refreshing. Genuine emotion from someone I assumed was purely mercenary. She returned to her chair, settling back with obvious satisfaction. That just makes this conversation more interesting. Emma's pulse quickened. She'd revealed too much, shown her hand when she should have remained detached. Here's what's going to happen, Patricia said, pulling out a checkbook. I'm going to write you a check for $50,000. In exchange, you'll disappear from Daniel's life today. The number hit Emma like a physical blow. $50,000 would solve every financial problem she had and fund her investigation into her father's death. All she had to do was walk away from Daniel. And if I refuse? Emma asked. Then I'll ensure that everyone at tomorrow night's fundraiser knows exactly who you are. A desperate woman with crushing debt who's latched onto a vulnerable man for his money. Patricia's pen hovered over the checkbook. Your choice, Miss Carter. Take the money and leave with your dignity intact, or stay and watch me destroy you socially. Emma stared at the older woman, seeing the calculation behind her cold eyes. Patricia wasn't just protecting Daniel from a gold digger. She was protecting something else, something she couldn't afford to have Emma discover. I need time to think about it, Emma said finally. You have until tomorrow morning. Patricia closed the checkbook with a snap. After that, the offer expires and the consequences begin. Emma left the office on unsteady legs, her mind racing. Patricia's desperation was showing, which meant Emma was getting close to something important. But at what cost? She found Daniel in the music room, his fingers moving across piano keys with surprising grace. The melody was melancholy, beautiful, full of longing that made her chest ache. That was quick, he said without stopping his playing. Usually Patricia's interrogations last at least an hour. Emma sank onto the bench beside him, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from his body. She made me an offer. Daniel's hands stilled on the keys. What kind of offer? The kind designed to make me disappear from your life. Daniel turned toward her, his jaw tight with anger. How much? It doesn't matter. Emma reached out, covering his hands with hers. I'm not taking it. Something shifted in Daniel's expression, surprise giving way to something warmer, more dangerous. Why not? Emma should have had a dozen practical reasons ready. The publicity potential, the networking opportunities, the chance to maintain her cover. Instead, she found herself telling the truth. Because I don't want to disappear from your life. Daniel's breath caught. His hands turned under hers, palms up, fingers interlacing. Emma. The way he said her name, like a prayer and a question all at once, made her heart stutter. This was dangerous territory, letting him matter this much when she was still lying about everything important. "Can I touch your face?" Daniel asked quietly. "I want to know what you look like." Emma nodded, then remembered he couldn't see her. "Yes." Daniel's hands came up slowly, fingertips barely brushing her temples before tracing the curve of her cheekbones. His touch was reverent, careful, as if she were made of something precious that might break. "Your skin is so soft," he murmured, thumbs stroking across her cheeks. "And warm. You blush when you're nervous." Emma's eyes fluttered closed as his exploration continued. He traced her eyebrows, the bridge of her nose, the curve of her lips with infinite patience. "Beautiful," he whispered. "I knew you would be." Emma's resolve crumbled completely. She leaned into his touch, letting herself pretend for just a moment that this was real, that she deserved his tenderness. When Daniel's lips found hers, she didn't pull away. Couldn't pull away. The kiss was different from their first one, slower, deeper, full of emotions she couldn't name. By the time they broke apart, Emma knew she was in serious trouble. Because somewhere between Patricia's threats and Daniel's gentle touch, she'd done the one thing she couldn't afford to do. She'd fallen in love with the man she was supposed to betray. Emma's laptop screen glowed in the darkness of her guest room as she scrolled through the encrypted files she'd finally managed to access. 3 weeks of playing the devoted girlfriend had given her enough time to map the house's Wi-Fi network and crack Patricia's study computer while the older woman attended her weekly bridge club. What she'd found made her stomach turn. Her father's name appeared in dozens of internal emails dating back 6 years, most of them marked urgent or confidential. Robert Carter hadn't just been a business partner to the Mitchell family. He'd been their accountant, their financial advisor, and ultimately, their greatest threat. The first email thread she opened made her hands shake. From r.carter@carteraccounting.com to p.mitchell@mitchellenterprises.com. Subject: Quarterly Review Discrepancies. Date: March 15, 2020. Patricia, I've reviewed the European shipping contracts as requested, and I'm seeing some irregularities that need immediate attention. Several payments to offshore accounts don't match our recorded transactions. We need to discuss this in person. Robert. Patricia's response was terse, dismissive. From p.mitchell@mitchellenterprises.com. 2. r.carter@carteraccounting.com. Subject: Quarterly Review Discrepancies. Date: March 15, 2020. Robert. I'm sure it's just a clerical error. We can review it next quarter. No need for alarm. Patricia. But Robert hadn't let it go. Email after email showed his growing concern as he uncovered what appeared to be systematic financial fraud. Money being funneled through shell companies, contracts being inflated, payments disappearing into accounts that couldn't be traced. Emma's chest tightened as she read her father's final email to Patricia, sent just 2 days before his death. From r.carter@carteraccounting.com to p.mitchell@mitchellenterprises.com. Subject: Urgent. Financial audit required. Date: August 10, 2020. Patricia, I can no longer ignore what I'm seeing in these books. Either we conduct a full financial audit immediately, or I'll be forced to contact the authorities. The discrepancies I've documented represent millions of dollars in potential fraud. I've prepared a complete report for Daniel. He has a right to know what's happening to his family's company. This ends now. Robert. Emma's vision blurred as the implications hit her. Her father hadn't died in a random accident. He'd been killed because he'd discovered Patricia's embezzlement and threatened to expose her. A soft knock on her door made Emma slam the laptop shut, her heart hammering against her ribs. Emma. Daniel's voice was muffled through the heavy wood. Are you awake? Emma quickly hid the laptop under her pillow and opened the door. Daniel stood in the hallway wearing pajama pants and a t-shirt, his hair disheveled from sleep. Is everything okay? She asked, noting the tension in his shoulders. Patricia got a call an hour ago. Emergency board meeting tomorrow morning. Daniel's jaw tightened. Victoria's father is flying in from London tonight. Whatever they're planning, it's happening fast. Emma's pulse quickened. If Patricia was escalating her timeline, it meant Emma was running out of time to gather evidence. What kind of emergency? Emma asked. Something about my competency to run the company. Patricia mentioned bringing in independent evaluators. Daniel's hands clenched into fists. She's trying to have me declared mentally unfit. The pieces clicked together in Emma's mind with horrifying clarity. Patricia needed Daniel removed from any position of authority before he could discover what she'd done. His blindness gave her the perfect excuse. "That's ridiculous," Emma said fiercely. "You're more competent than half the executives I've met." Daniel stepped closer, his hand finding her cheek with unerring accuracy. "You really believe that?" "I know it." Emma covered his hand with hers, fighting the urge to tell him everything she'd discovered. "Daniel, what if I told you there might be things about your family that you don't know? Things Patricia has been hiding." Daniel's expression grew serious. "What kind of things?" Emma hesitated. She needed more evidence before she could make accusations that explosive. "I think Patricia might not have your best interests at heart." "I've suspected that for years," Daniel said quietly. "But suspecting and proving are different things. What if we could prove it?" Daniel was quiet for a long moment, his thumb tracing circles on her cheekbone. "Emma, whatever you're thinking of doing, be careful. Patricia is more dangerous than she appears." A door creaked somewhere down the hallway, followed by the distinctive click of Patricia's heels on hardwood. Daniel immediately stepped back from Emma, but not before she caught the worry in his expression. "Daniel." Patricia's voice carried down the corridor, sharp with suspicion. "What are you doing out of your room?" "Getting some water," Daniel replied smoothly. "Emma heard me in the hallway and was checking to make sure I was all right." Patricia appeared at the end of the hallway, her silk robe immaculate despite the late hour. Her eyes moved between Daniel and Emma with obvious calculation. "How thoughtful," Patricia said, her tone suggesting it was anything but. "Emma, I trust you remember our conversation from this morning? About the decision you need to make?" Emma felt Daniel's confusion beside her, but she kept her expression neutral. "I remember." "Good. Because circumstances have changed. The timeline has been moved up." Patricia's smile was razor-sharp. "I'll need your answer by 6 a.m. tomorrow." After Patricia disappeared back into her room, Daniel turned to Emma with concern etched across his features. "What decision?" he asked quietly. Emma's throat tightened. She couldn't tell him about Patricia's bribe without revealing why she'd refused it, and that would lead to questions she wasn't ready to answer. "Nothing important," she lied, hating herself for it. "Just some logistical details about tomorrow night's fundraiser." Daniel studied her face with those sightless eyes that seemed to see too much. "You're lying to me." The quiet accusation hit Emma like a physical blow. "Daniel, whatever Patricia said to you, whatever she threatened or offered, you can tell me." Daniel's voice was gentle but firm. "We're supposed to be in this together, remember?" Emma wanted desperately to tell him everything. About her father, about Patricia's crimes, about the real reason she'd agreed to this arrangement. But looking at his trusting face, she realized that the truth would destroy whatever was building between them. "I can't," she whispered. Daniel's expression shuddered, walls slamming back into place. "I see. It's not what you think, isn't it?" Daniel stepped away from her, the distance feeling like a chasm. "You know what, Emma? Maybe Patricia's right about you." The words hit Emma like a slap. She watched Daniel walk away, his shoulders rigid with hurt and anger, and knew she'd just made a terrible mistake. But as she closed her door and pulled the laptop back out, Emma steeled herself for what came next. She had 12 hours to gather enough evidence to bring Patricia down. Even if it meant losing Daniel forever, she owed her father that much. The truth was worth any price she had to pay, even if that price was her heart. Emma opened a new browser window and began searching for offshore banking records, her father's voice echoing in her memory. He died trying to protect Daniel from Patricia's greed. She wouldn't let his sacrifice be in vain. Emma's eyes burned from staring at the laptop screen, but she couldn't stop now. It was 3 in the morning, and she'd been digging through Patricia's files for hours, following a digital trail that grew more damning with each discovery. The breakthrough came when she found Patricia's personal banking records hidden behind multiple password protections. Transfers of $200,000, $500,000, sometimes over $1 million, all flowing into accounts registered to shell companies with names like Meridian Holdings and Atlantic Ventures. But it was the timing that made Emma's blood run cold. The largest transfer, $2.7 million, had been made on August 12, 2020, 2 days after her father's final email to Patricia, the same day Daniel's accident had been reported in the Hartford Courant. Emma's hands trembled as she pulled up the newspaper archives she'd bookmarked weeks ago. The accident report was brief, clinical. Daniel Mitchell, 27, heir to Mitchell Enterprises, had been driving back from a business meeting in Hartford when a commercial truck ran a red light and T-boned his Mercedes. The truck driver, later identified as Marcus Webb, had fled the scene and was never found. Emma opened a new search window and typed in Marcus Webb's name along with the date. What she found made her stomach lurch. Marcus Webb had died 3 days after Daniel's accident. Single car crash, no witnesses. The obituary mentioned that he'd recently come into a large inheritance from a distant relative. Emma sat back in her chair, the pieces clicking together with horrible clarity. Patricia had paid Marcus Webb to cause Daniel's accident, then killed him to eliminate the only witness who could connect her to the crime. Her father had been about to expose Patricia's embezzlement. Daniel had been about to receive Robert's report. So Patricia had eliminated them both on the same day, making it look like unrelated accidents. Emma's phone buzzed with a text message. Unknown number. Stop digging or you'll end up like your father. Emma's blood turned to ice. Someone was watching her, had been monitoring her investigation. She quickly screenshotted everything she'd found and uploaded it to a secure cloud server, then cleared her browser history and shut down the laptop. A soft creak in the hallway made her freeze. Footsteps, trying to be quiet, but failing on the old hardwood floors. Emma slipped out of bed and pressed her ear to the door. The footsteps stopped right outside her room. Emma held her breath, her heart hammering so loudly she was sure whoever was out there could hear it. After what felt like an eternity, the footsteps moved away, heading toward the main staircase. Emma waited another 5 minutes before cracking her door open. The hallway was empty, but a faint light glowed from downstairs. Someone was awake, moving around the house. Against every instinct screaming at her to stay hidden, Emma slipped into the hallway and followed the sound. She needed to know who had sent that text, who else was involved in Patricia's conspiracy. The light was coming from Patricia's study. The door was slightly ajar, and Emma could hear voices inside. She crept closer, staying in the shadows. Can't wait any longer, Patricia was saying, her voice tense. The girl is getting too close to the truth. Then we handle her the same way we handled her father. The second voice was male, unfamiliar. Make it look like an accident. Emma's legs nearly gave out. They were planning to kill her. It's too risky, Patricia replied. 2 accidents in one household would raise questions. We need to be more subtle this time. What about the nephew? Is he still a problem? After tomorrow's board meeting, Daniel will be declared mentally incompetent and stripped of all authority. I'll have full control of the company, and he'll be too drugged to interfere. Emma's blood chilled. Drugged? Patricia wasn't just planning to have Daniel declared unfit. She was going to chemically incapacitate him. And the Sterling girl, Victoria, will play her part. Once Daniel is sedated and married to her, any claims he makes about financial irregularities will be dismissed as the paranoid delusions of a traumatized man. The pieces of Patricia's plan crystallized in Emma's mind with terrifying clarity. Eliminate Emma, drug and marry off Daniel to a complicit Victoria, then continue embezzling millions while hiding behind Daniel's supposedly diminished mental capacity. Emma started to back away from the door, but her foot hit a loose floorboard. The creak echoed through the hallway like a gunshot. The voices inside the study stopped abruptly. What was that? The man asked. Emma ran. She made it halfway up the stairs before she heard the study door slam open behind her. Heavy footsteps pounded across the marble floor, giving chase. Emma reached the second floor and sprinted toward Daniel's room, her bare feet silent on the carpet. She didn't knock, just burst through his door and slammed it behind her, throwing the deadbolt. Daniel shot upright in bed, instantly alert. Emma? What's wrong? They're going to kill me. Emma gasped, her back pressed against the door. Just like they killed my father. Daniel was out of bed in seconds, moving toward her with surprising speed and accuracy. Who? What are you talking about? Patricia. She's been embezzling money from the company for years. My father discovered it and threatened to tell you, so she had him killed. Then she caused your accident to keep you from finding out. Daniel's face went pale. Emma, that's impossible. Patricia raised me. She paid someone to crash into your car. Emma interrupted, the words tumbling out in a desperate rush. Marcus Webb. She transferred money to him the same day, then killed him 3 days later to cover her tracks. Heavy footsteps stopped outside Daniel's door, followed by the soft rattle of the handle being tested. "Daniel." Patricia's voice was sickeningly sweet. "Is everything all right in there? I thought I heard voices." Daniel looked toward the door, then back at Emma. In his expression, she saw the exact moment he made his choice. "Everything's fine, Patricia," Daniel called out, his voice steady. "Emma had a nightmare. We're handling it." "I see. Well, if you need anything, we're fine. Good night." They waited in tense silence until Patricia's footsteps retreated down the hallway. Only then did Daniel turn back to Emma, his expression grim. "Tell me everything," he said quietly. "And don't leave anything out this time." Emma's throat tightened with relief and terror. She'd finally told him the truth, but she might have just signed both their death warrants. "My real name is Emma Carter," she began. "And 5 years ago, your aunt murdered my father." As Emma told Daniel everything she'd discovered, she watched his face transform from shock to horror to cold, calculating anger. By the time she finished, Daniel looked like a man who'd just discovered his entire life had been built on lies. Which, Emma realized, was exactly what had happened. "We have to get out of here," Daniel said finally. "Tonight. If Patricia suspects you know the truth, neither of us is safe." Emma nodded, but her heart broke a little at the grim determination in his voice. The gentle, trusting man she'd fallen in love with was gone, replaced by someone harder, more dangerous. Someone who'd finally learned that the person he'd trusted most in the world was his greatest enemy. Daniel sat in stunned silence as Emma's words echoed in his mind. She'd been talking for 20 minutes, laying out a conspiracy that painted Patricia as a murderer and embezzler, but one detail kept circling back to haunt him. "Your father's name was Robert Carter," he said slowly, his voice dangerously quiet. Emma's breath caught. "Yes. Robert Carter, who worked for Mitchell Enterprises. Robert Carter, who sent those emails you showed me." Daniel's hands clenched into fists at his sides. "Robert Carter, who died 5 years ago." "Daniel, I can explain. You lied to me." The words came out flat, emotionless, but Emma could hear the devastation underneath. "About everything. Your name, your background, why you're really here." Emma felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. "I told you the truth about Patricia, about what she did to both our fathers." Daniel stood abruptly, pacing to the window with movements that were sharp, agitated. "You've been planning this from the beginning. The shy, desperate gardener who just happened to be working here when I needed a fake girlfriend. It was all calculated." "It wasn't like that," Emma said desperately. "I mean, yes, I came here looking for answers about my father's death, but everything between us, everything I feel for you. How can I believe anything you say?" Daniel whirled around, his sightless eyes finding her with unsettling accuracy. "You've been lying to me for weeks, playing the part perfectly, making me think." He trailed off, but Emma could hear the pain in his silence. "Making you think what?" she whispered. "Making me think someone could actually care about me. Not the Mitchell fortune, not the business connections, but me." Daniel's laugh was bitter, self-mocking. "I should have listened to Patricia from the beginning." Emma shot to her feet. "Patricia is a murderer, Daniel. She killed my father and tried to kill you. How can you still defend her?" "Because she never lied to me about who she was," Daniel said quietly. "She may be manipulative and controlling, but at least she's honest about her motivations. You seduced me under false pretenses." The accusation hit Emma like a physical blow. "I didn't seduce you. What happened between us was real. Was it? Or was sleeping with me just part of your investigation?" Daniel's voice turned cold, clinical. "Tell me, Emma, if that's even your real name, was everything an act? The coffee in the mornings, the conversations in the garden, the way you kissed me." Tears burned Emma's eyes. "My feelings for you are the only real thing in this entire mess." "I don't believe you." The simple statement shattered something inside Emma's chest. She'd known this moment would come eventually, had prepared herself for it, but nothing could have readied her for the devastation in Daniel's voice. "Your father threatened to destroy my family's company," Daniel continued, his tone becoming more detached with each word. "Maybe you decided to finish what he started. Seduce the blind heir, gain his trust, then destroy him from the inside." "That's not true and you know it," Emma said fiercely. "I could have taken Patricia's money and disappeared weeks ago. I could have sold the story to the press and watched your world burn. Instead, I'm here trying to save you. Or maybe you just realized I was worth more as a long-term investment than a quick payout." Emma stared at him, seeing the walls slam back into place around his heart. The gentle, trusting man she'd fallen in love with was gone, replaced by someone cold and suspicious. Someone who'd been burned too many times to believe in love anymore. "You're right," she said quietly, the fight draining out of her. "I did lie to you. I came here planning to use you to get information about my father's death. But somewhere along the way, I fell in love with you." Daniel's expression didn't change. How convenient. A soft knock on the door made them both freeze. Daniel moved to answer it, his movements stiff with barely controlled anger. Victoria Sterling stood in the hallway, perfectly dressed despite the early hour. Her dark hair was pulled back in an elegant chignon, and she wore a cream-colored suit that probably cost more than Emma made in 6 months. "Daniel, darling," Victoria said, her voice honey-sweet. "Patricia called me. She said there was some kind of emergency." Emma watched Daniel's face, saw the exact moment he made his decision. "Victoria, I'm glad you're here." Victoria's eyes flicked to Emma with undisguised triumph. "I came as soon as I could. Patricia mentioned that you discovered some disturbing information about Miss Carter." "Among other things," Daniel said, stepping aside to let Victoria enter. "It seems Emma isn't who she claimed to be." Victoria moved into the room like she owned it, her presence filling the space with expensive perfume and predatory confidence. "I'm so sorry, Daniel. I know how much you trusted her." The past tense wasn't lost on Emma. In Victoria's mind, Emma's relationship with Daniel was already over. "I think it's time for Emma to leave," Daniel said, his voice carefully neutral. "Permanently." Emma's heart shattered completely. "Daniel, please. Just listen. I've heard enough lies for one night." Daniel turned toward her, his expression carved from stone. "I want you out of this house within the hour." "But Patricia, I'll handle Patricia. Whatever she's done, whatever she's planning, it's my responsibility to deal with it, not yours." Emma wanted to argue, to make him understand that he couldn't face Patricia alone, but the finality in his voice stopped her. She'd lost him. Maybe she'd never really had him to begin with. "Fine," she whispered, moving toward the door. "But Daniel, when you realize I was telling the truth about Patricia, when you understand that she's not the woman you think she is, remember that I tried to warn you." She paused at the threshold, looking back at the man she loved one last time. "And remember that what we had was real, even if you can't believe it anymore." Daniel didn't respond. He stood rigid beside Victoria, who had already moved possessively closer to him, her hand resting on his arm. Emma left without another word, knowing that if she stayed even a second longer, she'd break down completely. As she walked down the hallway toward her room, she could hear Victoria's voice through Daniel's door, soft and soothing. "You did the right thing, darling. I know it hurts now, but you'll see. Some people will do anything for money." Emma packed her few belongings with numb efficiency, her hands moving automatically while her mind raced. She had to find another way to stop Patricia, another way to protect Daniel. Because despite his betrayal, despite the way he'd chosen to believe the worst about her, she still loved him. And love meant protecting someone even when they'd broken your heart. As Emma slipped out of the Mitchell house for the last time, dawn was breaking over the Connecticut hills. She had no money, no plan, and no idea how to save the man who'd just destroyed her. But she had the truth, and sometimes that was enough, even if it had cost her everything else that mattered. Emma sat in her beat-up Honda in the parking lot of a 24-hour diner, her laptop balanced precariously on the steering wheel as she frantically tried to contact the FBI. The evidence she'd uploaded to the cloud was damning, but she needed someone to act on it before Patricia could hurt Daniel. Her phone rang, the unknown number from earlier flashing on the screen. Emma hesitated, then answered. "Miss Carter." The voice was crisp, professional. "This is Agent Sarah Martinez with the FBI Financial Crimes Division. We received your uploaded files an hour ago." Emma's relief was so intense it made her dizzy. "Thank God. Agent Martinez, Daniel Mitchell, is in immediate danger. His aunt is planning something for this morning's board meeting. We're already mobilizing a team. Can you tell us where you are right now?" "About 2 miles from the Mitchell house." Emma glanced at the clock on her dashboard. 7:30 a.m. "The board meeting starts at 9. Stay where you are. We're sending units to your location and to the house." "Miss Carter, what you've uncovered here goes far beyond embezzlement. Patricia Mitchell has been running a money laundering operation for international criminals. Your father stumbled onto something much bigger than he realized." Emma's blood chilled. What about Daniel? Is he safe? We're going to find out. Stay on the line with me. Through the phone, Emma could hear Agent Martinez coordinating with her team, dispatching units, issuing orders. But all Emma could think about was Daniel's face when he told her to leave, the betrayal and hurt in his sightless eyes. Agent Martinez, Emma said suddenly, I think Patricia might be drugging Daniel. She mentioned keeping him sedated during a conversation I overheard. Drugging him how? I don't know. But if she's planning to have him declared mentally incompetent today, she'd need him to appear confused or unstable during the meeting. We're accelerating our timeline. Miss Carter, I need you to. Agent Martinez's voice cut off abruptly, replaced by dead air. Emma looked at her phone screen. No signal. A chill ran down Emma's spine as she realized her phone had been remotely disabled. Someone with serious technical resources was watching her, tracking her communications. Emma started her car and drove toward the Mitchell house, her heart hammering. She couldn't wait for the FBI. Daniel was running out of time. Daniel stared at his reflection in the bathroom mirror, though he couldn't see it. Victoria had brought him coffee and orange juice with breakfast, both of which had tasted slightly off. Now, an hour later, his head felt fuzzy, his thoughts sluggish. Daniel. Victoria's voice came from the bedroom, sickeningly sweet. Are you feeling all right, darling? You seem a bit pale. Daniel gripped the marble countertop, fighting a wave of dizziness. I'm fine. But he wasn't fine. His coordination was off, his reactions delayed. And somewhere in the back of his mind, Emma's voice echoed. Patricia is more dangerous than she appears. Daniel had spent the morning trying to convince himself that Emma had been lying, that her accusations against Patricia were part of some elaborate con. But the evidence she'd shown him, the emails and financial records, had been too detailed, too specific to fabricate. What if she'd been telling the truth? The board members are arriving, Victoria called. Patricia wants you downstairs in 15 minutes. Daniel's legs felt unsteady as he walked back into the bedroom. Victoria sat on his bed, perfectly composed, watching him with eyes that seemed predatory rather than concerned. Victoria, he said carefully, did you put something in my coffee? Victoria's smile never wavered. Why would you ask such a thing? Because I feel like I've been drugged. Daniel moved slowly toward the door, using the wall for support. And because Emma was right about everything else. Emma was a lying gold digger who almost destroyed your family's legacy, Victoria said, her voice hardening. You should be grateful we stopped her. We? Daniel turned toward her voice, understanding flooding through him despite his drugged haze. You're working with Patricia. Victoria laughed, the sound sharp and cruel. Working with her? Darling, this was my idea from the beginning. Patricia needed a partner with international connections to expand her money laundering operation. My family has been washing cartel money through European banks for decades. Daniel's blood turned to ice. The sterling investment was never legitimate, just a way to merge our operations and give Patricia access to our offshore networks. Victoria stood, moving closer to him. And marrying you was supposed to give us complete control of Mitchell Enterprises. Supposed to? Well, the original plan involved you remaining blind and dependent. But your little gardener girlfriend started asking too many questions. Victoria's voice turned venomous. So we had to accelerate the timeline. Daniel's vision, which had been gradually improving over the past month through treatments he'd kept secret from Patricia, suddenly sharpened. Not completely, but enough to make out shapes, movement, the general outline of Victoria's face. What he saw there chilled him to the bone. You killed Robert Carter, Daniel said quietly. Patricia handled that, though I did suggest the method. Victoria pulled a small vial from her purse. The same method we're going to use on you, actually. A heart attack inducer, completely undetectable in standard toxicology screens. Daniel's improved vision caught the glint of a syringe in Victoria's other hand. You're going to kill me. Eventually. But first, you're going to stumble into that board meeting, barely coherent from the drugs we've been giving you. You'll be declared mentally incompetent, stripped of all authority, and committed to a private facility where we can keep you sedated indefinitely. And if I refuse? Victoria's smile was razor-sharp. Then you'll have a tragic heart attack, just like your little gardener girlfriend is about to have. Daniel's blood froze. Emma. Patricia's people found her an hour ago. By now, she's probably already dead. Rage flooded through Daniel, burning away the drug-induced fog. With vision that was clearer than it had been in 5 years, he launched himself at Victoria, knocking the syringe from her hand. Victoria screamed, but her cries were drowned out by the sound of the front door crashing open downstairs. FBI. Everyone on the ground. Daniel had never heard a more beautiful sound in his life. Emma stood in the Mitchell foyer an hour later, her hands shaking as paramedics checked her vitals. Patricia's men had grabbed her in the diner parking lot, but Agent Martinez's team had intercepted them before they could inject her with whatever had been in the syringe. Emma. She turned at the sound of Daniel's voice, her breath catching. He was walking toward her without assistance, his movements confident and sure. But it was his eyes that made her heart stop. He was looking at her, actually looking at her, his green eyes focused on her face with an intensity that made her knees weak. "You can see," she whispered. "Partially. The surgery I've been having done in secret for the past month finally worked." Daniel stopped in front of her, his hand coming up to cup her cheek. "And the first thing I wanted to see was your face." Tears blurred Emma's vision. "Daniel, I'm so sorry I lied to you. I should have told you the truth from the beginning." "You saved my life," Daniel said quietly. "Even after I threw you out, even after I chose to believe the worst about you, you came back to save me." "I love you," Emma said simply. "That's what love does." Daniel's thumb traced the curve of her cheekbone, just like that first night in the garden. "I love you too, and I should have trusted that what we had was real." "It was real," Emma whispered. "It's the most real thing I've ever felt." When Daniel kissed her, Emma could taste salt from both their tears. But for the first time in weeks, they were tears of relief rather than heartbreak. "So what happens now?" Emma asked when they finally broke apart. Daniel's smile was soft, hopeful, full of the promise of a future Emma had thought she'd lost forever. "Now we build something real together. No lies, no pretense, just us." Through the French doors, Emma could see the garden where this had all started, where Daniel had kissed her to escape an unwanted engagement and accidentally found the love of his life. The roses her father had loved were blooming again, their petals catching the morning light like hope made visible. It was, Emma thought as Daniel pulled her closer, the perfect place for a new beginning.